Today's topic of discussion, the identity gap. You know exactly who you want to be. You can describe them, the way that they show up, the discipline they have, the decisions that they make, the life that they are living. And you've thought about this version of yourself so many times that you could literally draw them. And then you look at how you're actually living, and there's a gap. Not even a small one, but a significant one. It's between who you say you want to be and who you're actually being every single day. And that's the question that no one wants to sit with. The one that is sat in the back of your mind when everything goes quiet. It says, if I know exactly who I want to be, why am I not being them? So listen to me, because the answer to that question changes everything. So what is the identity gap? The identity gap is the gap between the identity you are claiming and then the identity that you are living. And most people, they have two identities running simultaneously. The stated identity, the one they aspire to be, the one that they tell people about, and the one that they really want to become. And then there's the operational identity, the one that their actual daily decisions are being made from. The stated identity says, I'm someone who's building something important. And the operational identity says, I'll just start properly on Monday. The stated identity says, I'm someone who takes care of their body. And the operational identity says, I'll just be strict after this weekend. The stated identity says, I'm someone who doesn't let other people's opinions dictate my choices. And the operational identity checks the likes on the post the second it goes up. But neither identity is fake. Both are real, they just run at different levels. And the gap between them is exactly the level of frustration that you feel when you're looking at where you are and where you want to be. So the identity gap, it isn't hypocrisy. It's not a weakness, but by understanding why it is there. Now this is why the standard advice actually fails. The standard advice for this problem is just motivation. Watch a video, watch a podcast, get inspired, feel the fire, and then just go. And trust me, it does work for about 48 hours. Because what motivation does is it temporarily puts the stated identity over the operational one. And then you get a feeling of the version of yourself that you are wanting to be because you're acting from that feeling. But then that feeling completely fades. And then the operational identity, the one that you have built through years of habits, decisions, and beliefs, it reasserts itself because it was the feeling that changed, but the identity never did. So motivation is actually like the weather. An identity is like the climate. You can have a warm day in the winter, but the season, it hasn't changed. The gap doesn't close because of how you feel about who you want to be. It closes for who you're actually building yourself to be. Decision by decision, day by day, and without feeling the overwhelming need to justify it. And this is why those people that seem effortlessly disciplined, they're not running on more motivation than you are. They're running on a completely different identity. But their behavior, it will look like discipline from the outside, but it will feel like the natural thing to do from the inside because they are consistent with who they believe that they are. So motivation gets you started, and identity is what keeps you going. But if the identity underneath hasn't yet shifted, your motivation will always eventually run out. And then you'll just default back to the person that you actually believe yourself to be. So this section is the specific mechanisms that help people maintain that gap and also make people feel uncomfortable, but in the best way. So the gap doesn't just stay open because you're not trying hard enough. It stays open because the story that you're telling, the evidence that you have been collecting, and the world that you are still living in are still voting for this old version. So if you start to change the votes, then that gap is going to start to close. So to give a real life example where I've experienced this internal conflict between the stated identity and the operational identity is with my relationship with money. And the most honest conversation with this I can give you is to do with money. I knew who I wanted to be with money. I wanted to be investing, disciplined, and not being reactive. And I could describe that version of myself in key details. And my actual relationship with money would tell a daily story for years on what my actual relationship with money was like. Because I would make great money and then spend it, and then make money again, and then spend it again. And I was convincing myself that it was just a strategy problem, that I needed to have a better system, a better plan. But it wasn't just a strategy problem, it was an identity gap. Somewhere underneath the aspiration was a version of me that still didn't believe they were someone with money who stayed with money, or someone that even deserved to earn it, hold it, and then compound it. The stated identity, it said one thing, but the operational identity was the one making all of the decisions. And until I closed that gap, not by wanting more, but by actually building a new story of who I was with money. That is the strategy that never mattered. It was always going to find its way back to the identity that lied underneath. And for a lot of people, I'm sure that story can feel very relatable and relevant in your life, where you'll earn more money and all of a sudden you find ways for it to leave your life again, and you'll blame it on bad habits, or you'll blame it on all kinds of different excuses, but ultimately it is because we are operating from the wrong state of consciousness, the wrong identity. So I knew I had to shift from going from my operating identity to the one where it was my stated identity. Now, if this feels relatable, I'm going to share with you now 4 steps how you can make that change and it be permanent. So first of all, step 1, name the gap honestly, not just the polished version, the real one. It is the specific difference between who you say you are and how you are actually living. And you can write it down if you have to, but you cannot close the gap if you're not willing to look at it directly. Step 2, start collecting different evidence. Every time you do what the version of you that you want to be would do, you're casting your vote for that identity. Not a big dramatic gesture, just one decision and one kept promise. And that is one moment where you acted from the new version, not the current one. The votes will compound, and then slowly but suddenly they will change. Step 3, change the story, but with honest reframes. Instead of I always start things and I don't finish, or I'm building the identity of somebody who goes and sees things through, not because it's currently true, because it is the direction that you are moving in. The story has to shift before the identity fully does. And step 4, be patient. The gap is not going to close overnight. There's always going to be a delay. It's from when you start changing the votes and when the identity fully updates. And that lag is where most people quit, and it's right before it clicks. And we're going to talk about this in the last video of this series, so don't quit in the lag. So listen to me when you know exactly what you want, but you keep living in the opposite. Because the gap is not proof that you are failing, it's proof that you are aware. And awareness is the first thing that has to exist before anything can change. Most people live their whole lives in the gap without ever naming it. And they just feel that frustration. And they keep calling it laziness, but then they just try and motivate themselves to be a version of themselves that they haven't created just yet. So you're not lazy, you're just running 2 identities. And the work, the real work, is closing the distance between them. And it's not with more motivation or just with a better system. It's created by 1,000 small decisions that are voting for the person that you are becoming until you become who it is you want to be. So that is the work. And every video of this series is a different part of how it gets done. So if this video hits, drop a comment below. What is the biggest gap between who you say you want to be and how you are actually living? Tell me the honest answer below, because that gap is the most useful data that you have right now. And don't forget, I read and reply to every single comment. So subscribe to the channel and the next video will find you when you need it. My name's Harley. Do the work, trust the process, and I'll see you in the next one.